Hi, everybody. I'm Cheryl Crisp for Movie Guide, and this is Coffee and Conversation with Dan Merchant. Dan, you are the executive producer, the director, the writer, and creator of Going Home. And it just kicked off its second season on Pureflix and is doing really, really great. Tell us about the show.
Well, first, I like to say that I write the show along with my wife, Kara Merchant, and Matt Michelatos. So that's our writers' core. And then I do direct most of the episodes, but Jason McKee and Jared Briley also direct great episodes on season two. So it's a real team effort to bring this story to life about a hospice nurse named Charlie Copeland, who's played by Emmy-nominated Cynthia Geary of Northern Exposure fame, who's a wonderful actor and just really brings this story of a dedicated hospice nurse to life. And the show is a beautiful show. It's challenging. It's funny. It's really dynamic, and there's a lot there. It's a good, entertaining television show, but it really does, I think, offer hope and illumination around a difficult subject, end of life care and leaving this world for the next one. So we bit off a lot, but with great writers and directors and actors, we're told that it works. And we're really happy that people find it to be such a beautiful show.
What made you tackle this tough topic?
It's a great question. One day, I mean, I've been doing television for 30 years, so I'm always thinking of ideas, and I was going, "Oh, what would that be?" And I had this idea of what would a medical drama look like if you're not trying to save the patient? What if the show's not about give me 10 cc's of morphine, stat? It's like, okay, I mean, medical shows have been on television since there was television, but how could we do something different? And I started thinking about um, hospice nurses. And it occurred to me in my personal experience with family members, they always seem to know the right thing to say in these very tender, difficult situations. And that idea just sort of took root and started talking with Kara about it. And we traded stories, and the idea just sort of blossomed. And it was during the pandemic. So there probably was just the backdrop of people dying all around, and there was the backdrop of kind of that worldwide pause where we're contemplating. And I guess part of my my assumption about why it's so difficult to talk about death and think about death, because it begs the question, it's like, what are you doing with your life, and how are you doing with your relationships, and how are you doing on a daily basis with these things? And that idea really kind of went, oh, now I see the show's not about death, it's about life. And that's where the really interesting intersections with people come. And you don't have to wait to be on your deathbed to go, gosh, I probably should apologize to so and so, or gosh, it would have meant a lot to me if they'd have reconciled with me, whatever. And there's a lot of those kinds of stories, the real heartfelt, heavy, beautiful, redemptive, cathartic kinds of stories are what we dramatize on Going Home.
I love the title, Going Home. It reminds us that this place is not our home. And I love the way the nurses talk about walking the patients home. Do you want the audiences to think deeper?
I do. I think you can't help but, and that's one of the beautiful things about Going Home, and storytelling that's got a redemptive element in it, is it does provoke a response. And that's what's cool about movies and television and music, different kinds of art. Those are my favorite kinds of art, but any kind of art really, is it allows the recipient to approach as close to the art as they want to. Somebody can watch Going Home and go, oh my gosh, that's exactly like when my mom passed, or that's exactly like the fight I'm having with my sister, whatever. But there's a safety of being out of range until you engage with the characters. But I think it can't help be thought provoking, because this is an experience we've all had, and or will have. This whole death thing is going to come for everybody. And the hospice nurses taught us a really interesting thing when we were researching the show. Their language was that death is not the opposite of life. Death is a part of the journey of life, which I know sounds kind of rudimentary, but that's not at all how I thought about it. And it's certainly not how death is depicted in popular culture, which probably plays a role in why we don't talk about it much. And so that's, I think, a beautiful thing that happens with going home, is it gives you permission to talk about it with your family members, your loved ones, and even if you're just recounting the story of, oh, wasn't it beautiful how that person apologized to that person and they made peace at the end? Wasn't that beautiful? That's a way into a conversation where you don't really have to go, you don't have to address it as head on, but you might be a doorway into a conversation that you need to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this show has a special place in my heart because my mom died years ago. I'm a family of 6 children, and she went through hospice before she died. And it just reminded me that death can be a beautiful experience. And I love the idea of walking, going home and being walked home. Um, what are you hoping to convey in the show?
Well, I think hope is a great word, and certainly inherent in going home and walking a client home. Those are gentle, beautiful, pleasant sorts of things. And death is hard, and we're going to miss the loved one, and they're going to leave a hole when it's gone. But there is a beautiful space if we're willing to go into it, and that's the lovely thing, particularly if you're a person of faith, is that God's in all these places, and there's an invitation for us, through the grace and compassion that God through Jesus shows for us, and that we can reflect to other people. And there's a reward there. Grace finds beauty in the most difficult things, and so being willing to sit with the family member that's dying. And sometimes, as you see in going home, the person who's about to leave the earth is kind of okay with it. It's the family around that's having the hard time. So sometimes in going home, that's who Charlie and Janie and Tamara, the other nurses, it's like, oh, my job isn't for the person in the bed, it's for the other people pacing by the window. That's who needs what I have to offer. And that's what's so interesting and somewhat counterintuitive, because like we said before, we just don't spend a lot of time contemplating death, but it's a beautiful, rewarding experience if we're willing to have it. There's rewards for us if we can sit through that.
Yeah, we all have two things in common. We're birth and death. And on social media, we talk about everything and even sometimes in social situations, but we don't want to talk about death. Why is that?
I feel it's because it begs the question of what are we doing with the time that we have right now? And sometimes we're on point and sometimes we're down a wrong road. And that's a challenging thing to have to confront within ourselves, to go, ooh, I probably shouldn't be here. I should probably be somewhere else. I'm the one that owes the apology to so and so, and that'll be hard, but I need to do it. So I feel like because death and life are linked in that way, I think that's challenging, and also fear of the unknown. Probably, it's like we don't really know, what comes next. I have my beliefs about that, but I don't know. I haven't been there, so I think that probably plays in. And I think we're missing an opportunity though, because I think that going home dramatizes these conversations like honestly and authentically, and not like it's magic and not like it's overly simple. It's a complicated, messy, beautiful show, as you've seen. So we don't turn it into just some kind of magic thing where, oh, death's fine, everything's great. It's like, no, it's hard, it's complicated, and it requires something of us, but it's a chance to give to those uh, who are leaving, or those who are hurting over someone leaving, and then a chance to, I don't know, a chance to experience grace. It makes room, if you will, for the Holy Spirit to show up. That's another thing that happens. There's some weird stuff that happens in those final moments for people. It happened with my own grandpa. It's like he's talking to people that I didn't see, and I don't know what that was, but it gave him peace, and he was beautiful, and it wasn't the morphine. He's talking to somebody, and then he looks back and he's talking to me, and he's talking to somebody, and he looks back and he's talking to me. And every single hospice nurse that I asked that about goes, oh yeah, you mean visitations? And I'm like, what? this happens a lot. It's like, oh, every hospice nurse I know has these stories. So be open for God to show up however he wants to show up, because there's some beautiful things that can happen in this space.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question because, like, how do you do your research? You know, it seems that the patients and the families that are going through this, they ask questions to the nurses that we all want answers to. And do you do research? Is it based on the Bible? Is it based on near-death experiences? Is it, based on, what the nurses have said?
It's simpler. Yeah, no, good question. It's a little even simpler than that, in that we, each of the writers, Kara, Matt, and I, have our own experiences with hospice. So we kind of compared notes. And then we wrote some of the episodes based on what our experience was and understandings were. And then went to our good friends at the Hospice of Spokane and interviewed their nurses and their administrators and just talked about, here's what we found. How common is this? And so and then they had story after story after story. So most of the going home stories are inspired loosely or in some way or another actual interviews with hospice nurses who told us their experiences. And so that was really profound. And the most beautiful thing, I asked them the question, the first question I asked when we sat down to interview them was, how do you guys always know to say the right thing? And their answer was, well, we try really hard to be present. And that's what you see dramatized by Cynthia Geary's character Charlie. She takes that little moment, a little quiet moment before she enters, so that once you're in the room, and this is what the hospice nurses explained, it's like, it's not about me. It's not about what I'm bringing into this room. It's what do they need in this room. And so when you're still and you're present and you're there just to help, you're there just to serve, it's not all that hard to see what's going on in the room and who needs help and who's hurting and who's fine with it and why is this thing going on and ooh, I smell something over here. It's a bit of a detective story, honestly, going home, where that's what Cynthia's character Charlie does every time she walks into the room is, okay, what's broken in here that I can help with? That's what the show really is. And I think that's part of what makes it accessible and pretty watchable is you're going with her. You come into that room and it's like, okay, what's going on here? How can she help? And that's that research, with the nurses, that whole we have to be really present or we're not going to do a good job. That was sort of the key to me. As soon as I heard that, I go, oh, well, that explains if you're really present, you're not going to just be talking to try and find the idea. You're very careful and you're thoughtful and you're responding to what the needs are that are being presented. And I think that's a beautiful gift that the hospice community gives to those in need and nurses to a larger degree. In general, that's a thing they do. But certainly hospice takes a special breed of character because that's a difficult thing, and to take the time to nurture and to truly listen. And again, that translates to all of our lives. We come home from work, we walk in the front door talking. Well, we might miss what the family needs tonight from me, that sort of thing.
Right. Really being present in where you are at that moment is so important. So I love the way, Dan, that you incorporate scripture and that each show ends with Charlie Copeland, the head award-winning hospice nurse, on her
Yeah.
porch, having her hot tea, watching the sunset, and talking to God like a friend. Why was it important to you to include that?
Great question. My wife Kara and I talk often about this thing we've been hearing since our childhood, which is, oh, Jesus is my best friend. And I didn't see all that many people talking to Jesus like their friend. It happens to be how my wife Kara prays is she just talks to God. And I'm like, oh, that's nice. And I had a thing when I was in Spokane shooting a TV series for the Sci-Fi Channel called Z Nation, the other side of the spectrum, creatively speaking. But there's beautiful sunsets in Spokane that you see in this episode. So I would sit on my deck when I made it home before dark and watch the sun go down. And it was just this beautiful reminder of today's done. Tomorrow will be a different day. Where'd we screw up? What'd we learn? It was just a beautiful kind of contemplation. So we just paired that idea of just taking a moment, to let God be represented by this beautiful, incredible sunset. which moves all of us. If we see God, we find God everywhere. If we're looking, He's there. And then this idea of He's our friend. So that was a beautiful combination of things. But really, it's Kara's language for just, you know, talk to him like he's your friend. That's what you say, that's what you believe, so act like it. And that's what we see with Charlie, which I think is a beautiful example.
It
And backed
is.
by scripture, of course. That's how, we're told how to pray all over the place, and in scripture. And so that was just a little more kind of colloquial modern version of, what you see in the Psalms, for example.
I think it's really great how you end the show like that, and I think it makes everybody just think, "Do I do that in my life? Do I really talk to Jesus like a friend?" And to take a breath at the end of the day and recount your day and give it back to God and say, "Things are gonna happen today, but I'm trusting you. I'm gonna put it in your hands." You created this TV series, and it's resonating with audiences. What's it like to think something up in your mind and have it in your heart, and then see it produced as a TV series?
It's a wonderful experience. And one of the things that's really beautiful is, so I've done a lot of TV shows over 25 years or so, and every once in a while, well, there's nothing like this, honestly, where the spirit on the set is so beautiful. It's a very actor dependent show, and we've got this wonderful crew that's very sensitive to the actors. We have a lower budget, so we've got to be pretty clever about how we can produce to put such a fine looking show on the air for the money we have. So we have to be pretty, we have to use all of our experience in order to be able to do that. And we figured out it's a very talent heavy show. So we've got these incredible guest stars like Karen Allen in season 2, Gloria Rubin, who won Emmys for ER, Mel Harris from 30 something, Ellen Travolta, George Newbern, all these wonderful actors that you'll recognize from some of your favorite movies and shows, who came in, and we just created this beautiful environment where they could give us their best. But for the scripts to come together the way they did with Kara and Matt, for this talent to show up and respond to the material, and to have these wonderful people say yes, and Cynthia Geary and Cozy Zulsdorf, who play the kind of the two leads. Um, it's just, you feel the hand of God on the set, honestly. Not to make too big a thing out of it, but it's like, this doesn't happen all the time. So there is something beautiful at work. And so once it gets created, then what I feel like my job is just to be a good steward to this idea that it I didn't think it up. It just kind of got put in my head, and then it blossomed, and I'm like, oh, I think I know what to do with this. And then you feel this sense of responsibility, to see it through, and to see it through in, I don't know, the most, with the most integrity, with the most patience for people. And production is hard, and all that, but it's like, if you can't be who you're supposed to be in those difficult situations, you kind of wreck the rest of it. So therefore, that helps keep you pretty centered. For we're doing an important thing. And I was joking with Kara about this. I go, I feel like God's letting us help with this. That's what we're really doing. We're just helping.
Can you give us a little hint on what to expect for season 2?
Absolutely. Season 2, for people that saw season 1, I think they're really going to dig season 2. It's a little bit faster. It's got all the heavy, beautiful, tough stuff that season 1 had that people really responded to. But we get out of the Sunset House a little bit more. We get deeper into the personal lives of Charlie and Cozy's character Janie, and Aviona Rodriguez Brown plays Tamara. So we get a bit more personal with it. That makes it more fun as a TV show. A little more humor, a little faster paced, and it's funny. I mean, I loved season 1. I was so happy we pulled it off. And then I have people tell me, "Oh, season 2 so much better," and I'm like, "Wait, so much better, really?" But it's a bit, I guess it's a bit more accessible. So if you haven't seen season 1 yet, just start with season 2 and then go back to season 1. But they're both great, and like I mentioned, these incredible guest stars that bring so much to it. And the plot's a bit wider and a bit deeper, I'm really pleased with kind of how accessible and entertaining season 2 is. People really enjoy it. We wanted to make it the same but different,
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
if you do the exact same thing again, then it gets stale for people. So
right.
we were trying to mix it up, and I like that story from the standpoint of, for a long time, hospice was sort of looked down on by the medical profession and kind of still is, right?
Yeah.
And the fact, I mean, uh, when my dad passed a couple of years ago during the filming of season 1, as a matter of fact, when the doctor said, "Oh, he's going into hospice," I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like I always thought hospice was like the last week of life, and it's like, no, it's like 6 months and in. It's like I don't think people know that. With other relatives, we would have done more. Like you saw Charlie talking about to the when she's reading the Far Side comic and the son who comes in, he's like, "Oh, I wish we would have done this with my dad." So there's little things in there where we're trying to be encouraging to people or just dramatize things that are true out in the world that hopefully people go, "Oh, I didn't know that," or "That's interesting," or "Gosh, that could be helpful down the road to some people." I hope.
I have to tell you, I loved it,
Oh,
and
good.
I hadn't seen it yet, and so I binged watched it so I could be prepared today, and I think I cried all the way through season 1, episode 2, The Cards You're Dealt.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was a
yeah.
tearjerker.
Yeah, that's a beautiful one, and to be able to get to work with somebody like Tom Skerritt on that one
Yeah,
was pretty powerful. You'll recall that really heartbreaking scene where he realizes that his wife is gone. Um, I didn't even call cut on that because Tom just went there,
he
and
made
he's crying. He falls down on the floor. He's got his head on the bed, and he's holding her hands, and he's just sobbing and sobbing. And after a couple minutes, I just walked over and kind of rubbed his back and went cut to the camera. But I couldn't bring myself to go cut because he's in this other moment. And I didn't want to interrupt.
If you enjoy videos that follow your values like ours and you want to help us continue, go to movieguide.org/donate because we're actually a nonprofit. You may not know that, but we're working in Hollywood every day to help families have more choices that follows their values. And also subscribe right now.